globally, we live in very interesting times. There's a lot going on across the whole wide world, politically, socially, economically. It's a lot of change and flux going on in the world. But there also is likely to be some big changes going on in your personal world. If you cast your mind back to 2008, astrologically, this was a big time because Pluto, the planet of intense transformation, entered into Capricorn, the sign associated with career, with making our way in the world, and with structures, money. I'm not an astrologer, but I have an interest in astrology around these major shifts. So if anybody's watching and you'd like to pop some comments in about this time in relation to Pluto and Capricorn and how things are shifting now, 15 years later in 2024, please feel free to pop some comments in the sections below. So now, 2024, in a couple of weeks, Pluto will be exiting Capricorn and entering Aquarius. And what this means, according to the astrologers, is that really difficult time of intense transformation. Pluto is also associated with the underworld. So with the repressed stuff, the unconscious, the dark stuff that needs to be brought into the open and worked with, that period is closing. So this big, long, roughly 15-year period can have been a time of immense challenge for many people associated with how they put themselves out there in the world. Now, it needn't only relate to things like career. It can relate to things such as being a parent and your child leaves the nest. With your children gone, there can be a sense of, what do I do now? Where do I get my meaning in the world? What am I here for? How do I now express myself in the world? Before, I was looking after my children. I was managing the household in relation to them and juggling all sorts of things. Now that they're gone, where do I get my sense of meaning? What am I here for? It can be a time of really having those big existential questions. What is it all about? How am I to be in the world? Why am I here? What is my purpose? So with all the struggle and intense transformation occurring over the past 15 years with Pluto in Capricorn, why now, with only a couple more weeks to go as Pluto is leaving Capricorn, why can it still feel so intense, so troubling? And why might you be experiencing a sense of regression, that old hurts are coming back up, that old issues are raising their heads? What's going on there? The fact is, the ego doesn't like change. And when we go through a big transformation, as we are, by leaving all the trials and tribulations of Pluto in Capricorn behind and going forward into a new personal era, we can experience that as like an ego death. And so a part of us is really like scrambling to hold on. The ego associated with who we were before, all our hang-ups, our grievances, our roles that we adopted early on in life to stay safe, whether we're a helper, a rescuer, a doer, whatever it is, we can be clinging back to those roles or finding it really hard to breathe new life into our world and our activity at the moment. The ego is literally clinging to all of that stuff, and we can feel it like our own impending death. There can be a sense where we get a bit worried about, preoccupied with our health, and a sense of existential anxiety, of a worry over our own existence. And with all that's going on in the world, that can all affect us more now too. But it's affecting us more because it's kind of mirroring our inner experience about ourselves. This part of our ego's dying, and it doesn't want to go. That's our resistance. So from A Course in Miracles terms, we are resistant to letting go of these final issues that we've been dealing with, our forgiveness issues that we would have been dealing with over the past 15 years in relation to how we are working or presenting ourselves in the world career-wise or in whatever fashion, how we are meeting the world. And we would have been working through issues associated with that. And the ego right now is like, oh, no, don't go forward. Don't go forward. Don't do the last hurrah and really let go of these old issues, because that means the death of the ego. Or in reality, what it means is we're less identified with our ego. But the ego in us, or that we identify with, it perceives it as a death. And so that's why we get all wobbly. So this wobbliness, I'll call it, is like another name for neurosis, of becoming preoccupied with our health in a bad way, like we're anxious about it. We just got more anxiety in the day, and we're feeling more frazzled, more stuck, all of that kind of thing. So in relation to all of this, I'd like to read a section from my book, The Bridge of Return. And in it, there's an essay called Eclipse Season. So it was written October last year in 2023, when we had a couple of eclipses. And funnily enough, this October, we've also had 2 eclipses. So eclipses in astrological circles are also times of immense transformation and transition, and so they can be difficult periods. So I'm going to read a bit from this essay because I think it relates well to this transition time as we step out of Pluto in Capricorn and feel, well, there'll be relief afterwards, but in the meantime, our ego can feel really threatened. And so we, because we're identified with the ego, also feel really threatened. So here's some stuff from that. This October, meaning October 2023, a year ago, is eclipse season. A solar eclipse will occur on October 14th, and a lunar eclipse will follow 14 days later. Astrology tells us that acute internal conflict is common around eclipses. They mark significant times of transition, such as death and rebirth. Was there an eclipse at the time of Jesus' crucifixion? Some people think so. On the 3rd day of April, 33 CE, which is the date that scholars believe Jesus died, the moon passed into the Earth's shadow, becoming shrouded in darkness. So there was a lunar eclipse. Whether a transition involves a significant shift in circumstances or is purely internal, change is threatening to the ego. If we feel fractious, reactive, neurotic, we can assume that we've regressed, gone back to old ways, pains and hang-ups, and this adds to a sense of failure. It can, therefore, be helpful to understand the greater forces at play during such time when our sensitivity seems amplified. Now, the essay goes on to describe a metaphor that Carl Jung had for this time when we're going forward and all of a sudden we seem like we hit a wall and all the old issues come up. He actually saw the situation as like we're travelling along like a river of water, and then we hit a wall, that's a block, and the water ends up running backwards into old riverbeds. And those old riverbeds represent those old issues. And that's when all the symptoms occur. If we're not consciously aware of what exactly is being brought up for us, it hasn't quite reached consciousness, those issues, that's when we suffer all the neurotic kind of symptoms and the anxiety. We just aren't conscious of what is going on. Now, what Jung was saying was that if we can become conscious of those old issues that are being activated, we can then work with them, and that will help unblock the wall, and then we can continue moving forward. However, in real distinction to Freud, Jung also said not only do we need to become aware of the old issues that are in these riverbeds over here so that we can work with them, but it's also necessary to think, why is this coming up now? And why have these riverbeds been activated now? What is going on over here? And in particular, what is going on over here? Where is the person actually heading towards? Because that will give us an indication of why this has come up now. The two are connected. So Jung says that this stuff coming up now is related to a future self that's wanting to be expressed. Where is this person traveling to in terms of their personality and the aspects of themselves that they want to express? That's on the other side of the wall. And for whatever reason, they've hit up against a block, and that block represents kind of a lack of courage. There's something that's preventing them from going straight on through, and that something relates to these riverbeds. The old issues over here need to be resolved so that the person has the courage to move beyond, well, with the courage then, and those issues resolved, the wall goes, and they can move on through into the future person, that embodying the aspects that they want to carry forth going forward. Now, in terms of A Course in Miracles, as the issues, the old grievances are worked through and resolved through forgiveness, that enables us to embrace those aspects of ourself, of our personality, that we've been too afraid to let bloom, if you like, because they didn't fit with our security patterns. They didn't fit as a child. They didn't fit with what we thought we needed to, how we needed to be secure. So as the shame and the guilt associated with those aspects of ourselves are resolved through forgiveness, we then can go on forward and express more of who we are in terms of a personality, but also because that involved letting go of shame and guilt through forgiveness, we'll also be expressing more of who we are as a whole spiritual self. So that is why the ego is so threatened at these junctures, at these real transition states. And that is why we can get so wobbly and concerned with our bodies and finances, things about the world. So as our mind is becoming freer of shame and guilt through the practice of forgiveness, our ego will try and root us further in the world to stop us from going forward. So that can come as a preoccupation with our body. We can suffer a bit of hypochondria, over concern with small symptoms, and we can become really concerned with our finances and financial security. Anything that roots us back to an identification with the body is what will serve the ego at this time, who is drastically scrambling to stay alive. Another way the ego can really scramble to stay alive is to go back to old patterns within certain relationships. And in this regard, I'd like to read the following from the Course. This is from a section called The Healed Relationship. You will find many opportunities to blame your brother for the failure of your relationship, for it will seem at times to have no purpose. A sense of aimlessness will come to haunt you and to remind you of all the ways you once sought for satisfaction and thought you found it. Forget not now the misery you really found, and do not breathe life into your failing ego, for your relationship has not been disrupted, it has been saved. So we're travelling along As a Course in Miracles student, we're practicing forgiveness as much as we can, as much as we're willing to, in any given situation, transforming our unholy relationships, which just means ego-driven and ego-perceived, into holy relationships, and which means we're not blaming others for our state of mind, for our lack of peace, and we're travelling along and we're going in that forward direction. Then we come to a sticking point where we're a little bit afraid to go forward because it means really letting go of a big chunk of our ego. And that's when everything goes back into the old channels, the old unforgiveness issues. And that's also when we can breathe life into our failing ego, as the Course says, by staying here and getting stuck. And the Course is saying, don't do that. Don't breathe life into your failing ego. It is failing. The ego is failing, and that's a good thing. Touch on the issues, a kind of touch and go approach. Touch on them. Let me help you work with them and overcome them and let them disappear, and then you can go forward. I hope this has helped you understand what might be going on for you during this time and at any other time where you feel like, oops, I've regressed. You were going forward nicely and going into some new facet of your life. This is when all this kind of thing occurs, no matter what time it is, astrology-wise on the calendar. When you're going forward and becoming more of who you are and feeling energized with that, the ego will kind of try and pull you back at some stage, and that's when it goes into those old dried up riverbeds and tries to bring them life again, tries to make those relationships unholy again. And yeah, just remember this caution from the Course. Don't breathe life into your failing ego, and ask Jesus to help you resolve those issues once and for all, but with, like Jung says, with the greater goal in mind. So not only is it the greater goal of embodying more of your spiritual self, and I say not only because that can be a bit nebulous to us, a bit abstract. It's true that that's the most important thing, but we're still identified as bodies. We haven't got to the heights of mysticism yet. We're still identified with bodies. So it can be more tangible and helpful to also know that actually equates to stepping into more of who you are as a personality, stepping into more of what brings you happiness and joy and a sense of energy and vitality in the world in terms of how you express yourself. Thanks for watching, and have a happy November 19th as Pluto enters Aquarius. It should be better. Bye.